Hey everybody, hope everybody's doing good today. Happy Easter to everybody. Um, Happy Easter, man. Happy Easter, happy Easter. Easter, Easter, Easter. Easter is a beautiful day. It's even more beautiful if you know the reason for it. Um, Anyways, it's it's hard for people to remember the reason for Easter and why it's so important. Um, as a Christian, we should know, the reason for it. I know kids, especially mine, they only really, primarily focus on, what they're going to get in their Easter basket, what kind of candy they're going to get, and, stuff like that. It's hard for me to remember that they're kids, but I try to help them, remember too the real reason for Easter. I know a lot of people talk about Easter on Easter and why Easter is what it is on Easter. But it's important because it's what makes us able to be Christians is Easter. So I'm gonna talk a little bit real quick about Jesus and why Easter is so important and the backstory behind it. So in Matthew 28, I'm not going to read from it because I pretty much know the story really well. But in Matthew 28 and other parts of the Bible, they talk about the death of Jesus and what led up to it. Last night, me and my family watched Passion of the Christ. I've seen it a bunch of times, but I just wanted to watch it again to kind of recap and refresh my memory and put I don't know how true and accurate it is, but to put a visual to what the Bible tells us happened to Jesus and when he died on the cross for us. I'm not going to lie, when I watched that movie, especially towards the end when they're torturing Jesus and beating him and all that, man, it brings some tears to my eyes. It's powerful, but it's sad, but it's true. And, the tears mainly are of guilt because you see what all he had to go through and how we act. And it just, man, it makes you feel guilty, gets you thinking about what you can do better and things that you have to do better. And like, man, if he did all that for us, why can't we do more for him? Anyways, so a little backstory on Jesus and what happened. So the Pharisees, which were religious leaders, the people of power or had some power and authority in the religious realm, they didn't like Jesus. They did not like him at all. I think really they were jealous of him because the Pharisees wanted power. They wanted the respect. They wanted the power and this and that. And Jesus had that, but he didn't want it. Like he wasn't striving to get it. He wasn't working hard to get it. He just had it. I mean, he was born the Son of God. And the Pharisees were jealous. And they were jealous of the following that Jesus was starting to amass. And they couldn't deal with it. So the Pharisees were skeptical of Jesus. They didn't want to believe in him and this and that, and they were jealous of him and mindful of the things that he was doing, and they were always questioning him and his followers, and they thought he was being blasphemous. They thought he was just full of it, just another fake, another phony. Jesus tried to tell them who he was, but they didn't want to go for it. They didn't want to go for it. They didn't want to believe. They chose not to accept, and they chose not to believe in who Jesus said that he was. And anyway, so they paid Judas, which was a disciple of Jesus. He had seen Jesus heal people, and he had seen Jesus heal people and work miracles and raise people from the dead and, give sight to the blind and help deaf people to hear. I'm sure Judas saw all of those things happen before his very eyes. For him, I believe seeing should have been believing. And Jesus foretold the fact that somebody was going to betray him. And I'll be doggone, Judas did. He betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver is what he betrayed Jesus for. He gave the Pharisees the location of Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Shame on him. 30 pieces of silver. And I believe that's one of the reasons why the Bible talks about money and the love of money being the root of all evil, because that, to me, that's one of the bigger places in the Bible where it tells you that somebody did something really bad for money. But it had to happen like that. You know, it had to happen like that. I'm sure Jesus already knew what was going to happen. He let it play out. The reason that the way it did, but he knew that it was going to serve a purpose. He knew what was going to happen out of them arresting him. So they arrested Jesus. They got his location from Judas for 30 pieces of silver. Whew. And the Pharisees, they kind of gave him a little trial or whatever and questioned Jesus on, who he was and who he claimed to be and what his intents and motives were and stuff like that. But they had already heard Jesus say those things of what he was there to do, and they knew that he had claimed to be, or said he was, the Son of God, the Son of Man. Indeed, he was. They couldn't believe it. I don't know why, but it served its purpose in the story. And they brought him to Pilate, Pontius Pilate, Roman governor, and they couldn't really find any fault in Jesus. They couldn't really find anything that he did wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. Jesus never lied. He never stole. He never cheated. He never did this. He never did that. He was the only sinless human being that ever walked the face of this earth. And Lord, forgive me if I'm calling you a human being in error, but you had an earthly body for approximately 33 years or so, give or take. And while he was here, he was sinless. No sin committed. All he did was love people and teach love and forgiveness and heal the people and just bring peace to people. That's all he ever did. That's all he ever did. They brought him before Pilate. He couldn't find anything wrong that he had done. And I guess it was during the Passover celebration. It was a custom for Pilate to release a prisoner of the crowd's choosing. So they had Barabbas, who was a criminal, a murderer, a notorious murderer and a notorious criminal. And then they had Jesus. So Pilate asked the crowd, which one of these two will you have me release? Barabbas or Jesus? The crowd chose Barabbas. Pilate was like, man, you sure? So he asked him again. The crowd chose Barabbas. So Pilate released Barabbas. And the crowd just shouted, crucify Jesus. Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. And that's the people chose to release Barabbas over Jesus. At the directive of the Pharisees and religious leaders that were there. I'm sure they probably insinuated that and started that, and then everybody else just followed suit and started saying, crucify him, kill him, kill him, kill him. Free Barabbas, kill Jesus. Pilate washed his hands with a bowl of water, said, his blood is not on my hands, it's on yours, do with him what you will. So they beat Jesus. They beat him with a lead-tipped whip and other things, I'm sure. They beat him. They beat him, they beat him, they beat him. They put a crown of thorns on this man's head. They mocked him. They spit on him. They spit on him, mocked him, threw things at him, and just beat him, belittled him. It makes my stomach sick. They beat him, man. They beat him. They ridiculed him. They mocked him. They spit on him. Some of the lowest forms, the highest, just highest disrespect ever. I'm sorry. This gets me a little emotional. It's crazy, man. Man. They did all those things to Jesus. They made this man, I'm sure he could barely stand or walk at this point. They made him carry a cross to what's known as the place of the skull, which was the site at which they were going to hang Jesus up on the cross to be crucified, to die. A man named Simon helped him along the way. They get Jesus there. They run a nail through his hands, both hands, into the cross, and nail both of his feet to the cross. And then they mocked him some more. Said, oh, if you really are the Son of God, bring yourself down from this cross and blah, 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 blah. Sad, man. And then another fun thing, I skipped over this. I'm sorry. I'm backtracking a little bit. So when the Pharisees and religious leaders and Pilate was asking Jesus to defend himself against the accusations that were made against him, Jesus had nothing to say. He had nothing to say. He had nothing to say. Pilate asked him, are you the King of Jews? And Jesus said, you have said it. That's all he said. He said nothing else while he was being questioned and accused of, I think it was ultimately blasphemy that the Pharisees were trying and accusing him of, which in that time was punishable by death. He said nothing in his defense. Now, I think about my kids especially, or even us as adults, when somebody accuses us of doing something, we're like, no, we didn't do it. No, it wasn't me. And 9 times out of 10, we're guilty when we say those things, but we're lying and trying to defend ourselves. Jesus was innocent and said nothing. Jesus was innocent and said nothing. He was innocent and said nothing. Innocent and said nothing. Just think about that the next time somebody accuses you of doing something and you want to go blah, 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 blah. Remember that. Jesus was innocent and he said nothing. That's powerful, man. He was innocent and said nothing. That speaks volumes. His silence speaks volumes. He didn't have to say a word. That just shows you he is who he says he is. He is the Son of Man, the Son of God. He is. He is. So they beat him, hung him on a cross, nailed his feet down, nailed his hands down, mocked him some more. And, and before all this had happened, Jesus had said, and the Pharisees had heard him, Jesus said, I'm going to destroy the temple and then rebuild it in 3 days. They were like, oh man, he can save other people, but he can't save himself. Come down from this cross if you really are the Son of Man. Come down. I'm sure Jesus could have called on his angels and called on God and did this and did that and got up off of that cross if he really wanted to, but it had to happen. And he knew that. I think he knew that. He knew it had to happen. It served a purpose. He knew what he had to do. He knew what had to be done. So he didn't do any of that. He stayed right there and he died on that cross for us. He died on that cross for us. And when he died, the earth, was turned black for a period of time. There was earthquakes and the temple was destroyed. The curtain of the temple was, split in two, top to bottom and this and that. And Jesus, he died. And he died. He died. He died for us. And he rose again on the 3rd day. That's what Easter's about. That is what Easter's about. Jesus died for us and rose again on the 3rd day. Died for us and rose again on the 3rd day. If it was not for him doing that, we will be spending or would be spending an eternity in hell in the lake of fire. Hell, fire, and brimstone. Jesus was innocent and said nothing. Jesus was innocent and they killed him for it. He was killed for it. He was killed and died for us. He died for us out of love and this and that for us. He died for us. And you know what's crazy? What really speaks out to me, while he was hanging on that cross and those people were mocking him and making fun of him, spitting on him and beating him and throwing things at him, you know what's funny to me? Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He asked the Lord for forgiveness for the people who killed him. He asked for forgiveness from God to forgive the people that killed him, who put him on that cross and beat him and made fun of him and this and that. He asked God to forgive him. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. If that doesn't tell you something, then you just ain't, your ears don't work. Your ears ain't big enough. He asked the people that killed him. He asked the Lord to forgive him. He asked God to forgive him. That is powerful. That is one of the most powerful things I've ever heard. The people that killed him, he asked God to forgive him. He asked God to forgive the people that killed him, who put him there. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That is powerful, man. It gets no more powerful than that. Those words right there. In that context, man, you can't beat it. There ain't nothing more powerful you can tell me. They just ain't. That is powerful, to ask God to forgive the people who are killing you, who killed you. That, if that ain't love, I don't know what is. And he did that and endured all of that for me and for you, for all of us. But you know what? He died on that cross not only to save us, but to save the very people who put him on that cross. And if that don't hit your heartstrings, I don't know what will. Now, watching The Passion of the Christ and then talking about the death of Jesus, it makes me feel guilty in a way. It makes me feel guilty because I know that I could be doing better. But my flesh, man, sinning, and we have to do better. We have to do better. We have to do better. All of us in this country, all over the world, us as Christians, we have to be better than what we are. There is always room for improvement. But remember, God does not expect perfection. He just expects progress. He seeks to have a relationship with you and with me and with all of us. We are his children. We are his children. We have to do better. Go hard for God. Go hard for God. Go hard for Jesus, man. That man, he died on the cross for us out of love, to save us, really to save us from ourselves, to save us from sin. And ask God to forgive the very people that killed him. That is beautiful. It's powerful, man. So, anyways, I just wanted to talk about that today. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Easter. I'll see y'all again soon. Bye-bye.